Greetings. Thank you for tuning into this 2020 primary election candidate forum for the 35th District Legislative Representative Position 2. The forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Mason County, along with the League of Women Voters of Thurston County and Thurston County Community Media. This forum is being held electronically. Candidates, the moderator, and timers are joining us using Zoom links with the help of TCM. First, a bit about the League. The League is a nonprofit organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in their government. The League neither supports nor opposes candidates or parties. They are nonpartisan. The League registers new voters, studies issues, and advocates for its position with the legislature and other governmental bodies. Despite its name, the League is open to both men and women age 16 and up. I'm Joel Meyer, the Public Information and Government Relations Manager for Mason County PUD3. And I'll be moderating this forum. A timer will show a sign when you have 30 seconds left, and then again when you need to stop. I must emphasize when you need to stop. And I will let you know these times. These times Tony will be showing in the Zoom window because all of us are here on video today. So the candidates for this position are Darcy Huffman, Drew MacEwen, and Earl Burt. For this forum, candidates will each have 1 minute to respond to a question about qualifications, followed by a series of questions in alternating order and ending with 1 minute closing statements. So the first question will be, why are you most qualified for this position? And each candidate will have 1 minute to respond, and we will begin with Darcy Huffman. So Darcy, why are you the most qualified candidate for this position?
Well, I have 25 years of retail banking, finance, and risk management experience, along with 10 years in nonprofit work. And so I believe that my experience brings with it an ability to build bridges, to gather people together at a table, and to come out with solutions that'll work for everyone.
Thank you. Drew MacEwen, the same question. Why are you the most qualified candidate for this position?
Yeah, thank you, Joel, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this. I appreciate this opportunity. I've been in office for 8 years. That's given me a very good and broad look at how state government operates and where we lack in efficiencies, where we can improve in efficiencies. And as the assistant ranking member on appropriations, a keen insight to to how our state budget works and how we can address the major shortfall that we're coming up to now. And I think that seasoned leadership is needed in this time. And in my background, I served in the Navy. I was in the submarine force, and when I got out, went into the business world, and that has given me a keen insight into also how to operate efficiently. When you have to sign the front of a paycheck and put employees ahead of yourself, that gives you a keen perspective on the sacrifices that you have to make, and also how to live with the consequences, good and bad, of what comes out of Olympia. And so with that background and also currently serving in there with appropriations, I think that gives me a keen look at how to best do the job.
Thank you, Drew. And the same question for Earl. Why do you think you're the most qualified candidate for this position?
First of all, I'm a rookie politician. And I have hit my overload in the games being played with people's lives. I'm currently the president of a board member of a local food bank. I've gone through all of the budgets and but getting board members and different things for running the food bank. I've worked my whole career in the Navy as a civil engineer. Yeah, I think I'll do a good job. I'll hustle, and I'm hustling now. Thank you.
Great, thank you all three. For the following questions, the first respondent will have 2 minutes. The subsequent respondents will have 1 minute to respond. And I'll rotate the questions among the candidates so each one has a chance to start first. So we'll begin now with Drew with the first question. After you're done, Drew, I will follow up with the question again so the other two know what the gist of the question is. Resulting from slowing economic activity due to the pandemic. Thousands of Washingtonians have either lost their jobs or suffer lack of income due to business closures. and the state now faces a new significant shortfall in the budget. How will you propose to address this shortfall without causing additional hardship on the state citizens? And you have 2 minutes.
Well, that's going to be the most prominent thing that we're going to be addressing. We have an excess of a $5 billion deficit that has to be addressed between now and June 30 of next year, and in excess of an $8 billion deficit over the 4-year outlook. We operate under a 2-year budget with a 4-year balanced budget requirement. So unlike the federal government, we can't go into debt, we can't print money, we can't bail ourselves out. We have to operate with what the taxpayers give us. And for the last few years, I've spoken about this on the House floor, which is why I voted against the last few budgets, that we were not setting ourselves up for an economic downturn. Nobody could certainly have seen the COVID crisis coming, but we were due for a recession. And this is what happens when you've had 30 years of unchecked one-party rule. They've spent every last dime. They've refused to fully fund the rainy day fund and have substantially ending fund balance to be able to weather storms. And here we are in one of the most challenging economic environments that we've seen since the financial crisis. And the lessons that were not learned out of that. And since I came to office, we've seen a budget go from $34 to $54 billion. And instead of putting money aside for a hardship, we're now in this situation. So as the latest economic forecast was just released this last week, and we first and foremost have to address the in excess of $5 billion that has to be addressed between now and June 30th. We need to go in special session now. And I've been calling for that for the last few weeks, and that call's been unheard. The longer we wait, the harder it's going to be. So we've got to put everything on the table. And that includes looking at, where are the priorities of government? Those have to be funded first. We also have to look at how well are we enforcing the current tax code. I've been working with others that there's a large amount of money that is going uncollected right now. That has to be looked at as well. We also cannot tax and fee ourselves out of this. That's not going to be the solution. We also can't have tremendous cuts to the very programs that are needed right now. But this is the situation that's been thrust upon us. And I look forward to continuing to work through that on a bipartisan basis and hopefully bring the other side together on that.
Okay, thank you. Darcy, you have 1 minute, and I will truncate the question. How will you propose to address the shortfall without causing additional hardship on the state's citizens?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is not ask our workers to take another cut in pay. We always seem to try to balance a budget on the back of workers and working families and of single moms and women, and we can no longer do that. So you are right. We do need to make sure that we are collecting all of the taxes that are due to us. And we need to also make sure that we don't raise taxes on anyone. And no new taxes. We've heard that from time and time again from our voters. And I, for one, have been listening to that. So we will need to cut budgets with a fine pointed scalpel in order to make sure that we get to balance this budget as we're going to need to without cutting much needed programs.
Thank you. And Earl, I'll ask you the same question once again. I'll break it down to the gist of the question, which is, how will you propose to address the shortfall without causing additional hardships on the state's citizens? And you have 60 seconds.
Thank you. First of all, there was a rainy day fund. There was $1 billion, and the legislators appropriated $100 million to the governor for the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. The thing how to get more money is you need to work. You need the jobs open. But you just can't say we're going to open it. We need the people to be accountable with their safety measures and with distancing and that type of thing. And if they do that, then we'll reopen the government, we'll reopen the businesses, and we'll get our taxes coming in from our sales tax. The people have to do it, not the government. The people have to make the difference in this COVID thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the next question, the first question will be placed to Darcy. You'll have 2 minutes to make comments, and the other candidates, Earl and Drew, will have 1 minute each. The issue of racial justice and trustworthy policing have riveted the state. What concrete steps do you propose to move Washington towards fairness in health, education, and job opportunities while promoting effective, safe policing?
So I think the first thing that we have to do is understand that racism exists. We are all swimming in the waters of systemic racism. And our first job is to recognize that we are wet. And so until we do that, we cannot cure this disease that we call racism. I firmly believe that the police are not our enemy. The police are our friends, but there are bad policemen, and there is no time like the present to take a look at reviewing the way that we treat people in general. I know we that live in rural Washington, we look at our police in a different way than people who live in Seattle. There are different problems, there are different crimes, there are different ways that we look at our police, and we need to be able to see that and to recognize that. We cannot legislate our way out of this. We can pass laws that people that hold people accountable, but we have to change the way that we look at each other and the way that we treat one another. And that is not something that you can legislate. That is something that we must do by recognizing that there are issues and by addressing them within our communities.
Thank you. Earl, you're next on the question here, and I'll get to the gist of it again. What concrete steps do you propose to move Washington towards fairness in healthcare, education, and job opportunities while promoting effective, safe policing?
Thank you for the question. The city of Camden, New Jersey, 7 years ago, drew down their police department, dismantled it, and put it back together. And as a result, 40% of major crimes, they used police out in the, they had the rookies coming out of school, they had them working, on the beat, working with the people. If everybody could say Black Lives Matter, the two candidates that are with me here, that makes a difference. People are suffering. People have been, there's been racism in this country that's been running, and it's still evident, just like Darcy said. And it isn't going away until there is a change in everybody's heart and how they address and view people of color. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. And Drew, same question again. What concrete steps do you propose to move Washington towards fairness in healthcare, education, and job opportunities while promoting effective, safe policing?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, let's as an institution in the legislature, let's be the first example, because you cannot you can't legislate love, you can't outlaw hate. What's in somebody's heart is what's in their heart. And so first and foremost, as an institution, the House of Representatives needs to lead by example and ensure that we are treating everybody equally. We have to lead by example. That is one of the most concrete things we can do. Secondly, but really most importantly, what happened to George Floyd is completely unacceptable. And the officer that did that deserves to go to prison. I also, though, we've got to, our state has led the nation actually in police reforms. We passed a bipartisan bill 2 years ago to address a lot of the things that happened in Minnesota. And let's be clear, that's where it happened. And I'm not saying that we haven't had issues in our state, we have. But we've passed comprehensive bipartisan legislation in this state to address that. So we need to lead by example, and we need to, and that is one of the biggest things that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. And we'll start the next question with Earl. Earl, you'll have 2 minutes to respond, and Darcy and Drew will have a minute each. So several areas within the state have elected sheriffs who publicly and defiantly declare which of Washington state's laws they will or will not obey and enforce. How do you propose to address this issue?
Laws, yeah, thank you for the question. Laws are not are to be followed. For a sheriff to say, I can't do this or I won't do this is unacceptable. You get like the commission, and even for people like in Franklin County, that Mr. Dieter, Clint Dieter, he had a forum in a potato factory or a potato storage area where he brought in all kinds of people for gubernatorial races. And that guy violated Governor Inslee's don't have a meeting bigger than 5 people. There was like 200 people in that storage area. So it just doesn't permeate with sheriffs not following the law. It's elected officials, and Drew is one of those guys that helped Dieter, cause a lawsuit and playing games with people's lives. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. And in playing games with people's lives and sorting out what laws you want to play for and what you want to do, wrong. It's wrong. And people's lives are involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Drew, I'm sure that you know what the gist of the question is. How would you propose to address this issue?
Well, first of all, I want to respond to what Earl just said there. I've never even had a conversation with Clint Didier. I'm not involved in his lawsuit. I have nothing to do with that. I do have a federal lawsuit that's challenging the continuation of an emergency proclamation. And that is a constitutional question that does need to be addressed. And that has been funded by me, not by the taxpayers. I have nothing to do with Clint Didier. So, Earl, I think you need to make sure that you've got your facts correct before you level an accusation. But also to the question of following the law, we haven't had that example. The governor's chosen that immigration laws would not be followed. And he's picked and chose what he thinks should and shouldn't be the law. But meanwhile, then he criticizes those that exercise that same discretion. His own administration has said discretion that enforcement is discretionary, whether it's through ecology or through law enforcement. So either we have a consistent mandate from the top to the bottom, or we don't. And this governor has had his own algorithm as to what is and isn't going to be enforced.
Great. Thank you, Drew. And finally, Darcy, you will have a minute on this as well. How do you propose to address this issue?
So Jimmy Carter once said that every day you're given a piece of wood and you make the decision whether to build a bridge or a wall. And I'm a bridge builder. And so I would like to have a conversation. I just had a conversation yesterday with some people, with some friends of mine, and talking about this exact issue. And I would like to understand one-on-one why a sheriff doesn't feel like he needs to follow the laws that have been passed by the people of Washington State. And maybe with having that kind of a conversation, we might be able to work our way out of this without passing more laws or involving other types of confrontation. I think conversation is what is needed here, and understanding when laws are passed. So that's what I would propose.
Very good. Thank you. The next question will start with Drew, and you'll have 2 minutes to respond and 1 minute per candidate after that. This is, I think, probably one of the shortest questions I have. Do you support continuing to fund vote by mail in Washington State?
Yes, I do. It's worked in this state. I don't have any issue with it. I think we always need to look and make sure that what's currently being utilized is the most effective and efficient and secure way to do it. So we always need to take a review look at how we are operating and ensure that we're meeting the standards that we expect to have. But yeah, it's worked. The state of Washington and people, by and large, enjoy it, and I have no issue with it whatsoever.
Thank you. Same question for you, Darcy. Do you support continuing to fund vote by mail in Washington State?
Absolutely, and actually, I think we should do it nationally.
You get a prize for the shortest answer today so far. And let's wrap up this question with Earl. Do you support continuing to fund vote by mail in Washington State?
I'm spot on with this, sir. Vote by mail is awesome. And also, with regard to the voters pamphlet, that way back when the Washington State Constitution, the farmers in this country didn't trust government. They said, we want a voter's pamphlet. And having both, vote by mail and the voter's pamphlet, it's awesome. And it works. The elections are the voting is the grease that makes this country run, makes democracy. And it works, and I like it, and continue with it. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, that brings us to question number 5, and we'll start with Darcy on this one. You'll have 2 minutes to answer. Do you feel that climate change is real and poses an immediate threat to the environment and our health and safety? And what approach to reducing carbon emissions would you support?
Yes, I do believe that climate change is real. Science has proven that over and over again, and our COVID-19 that where we've had to stay at home and not travel so much by car has done wonders for our environment all over the world, not just here in Washington State. I am more of a carrot person than a stick person. So I think that there needs to be some incentives that are not financial in order to, or that is not a, like the carbon tax. I think there's other ways of getting people to reduce their carbon footprint other than by charging somebody a tax on gasoline, which certainly would affect people living in the 35th more so than many other people. I think there are many different ways that we could do that, including increasing bus transportation, including increasing trains, making carpooling, even giving people incentives for carpooling. Instead of charging people to have a electric vehicle, maybe giving them an incentive to get one. So there are lots of things that we could do in order to reduce our carbon footprint without increasing taxes or causing harm to the economy.
Thank you, Darcy. Next, we'll go to Earl. You'll have a minute for a response to this. Do you feel that climate change is real and poses an immediate threat to the environment and our health and safety? And what approach to reducing carbon emissions would you support?
Thank you. Yes, I do believe in the carbon dioxide levels going up and affecting our environment and affecting our way of life and our health. It will continue to get worse. Some of the things that Darcy just mentioned with regard to having electric cars and emissions reduction is so very important. We need to do that, and we need to do it in a very logical and expert analysis support. We need science to back us, but we don't need games being played by politicians and by governments and by industry to stop that. And thank you.
Thank you. And Drew, you get to wrap up this question, which is, do you feel that climate change is real and poses an immediate threat to the environment and our health and safety? What approach on reducing carbon emissions would you support?
Yeah, we do have climate change. I've said that before. That's not an issue to me in terms of whether we have it or not. We do. And what's interesting, what we've seen with the current COVID crisis and a massive work at home movement that's occurred is that the carbon pollution, we saw a reduction roughly of 18 to 20%. And I just, you put that in perspective, I'm a big hockey fan, and I like to quote Coach Herb Brooks, who coached the 1980 team. He said, out of adversity is born great opportunity. And so with this current adversity we have here, I think we have an opportunity both for government and the private sector to fundamentally reshape how we work. And we've shown this in these last couple of months that we can do that, and that has a significant impact, positive impact on our environment. I also drive an electric car. I was one of the first ones in the legislature to do that in 2013, and went from one charging station to now I think we have a bank of a couple of dozen of them. So again, you lead by example, and that is one of the biggest things we can do.
Thank you, Drew. We'll move on to our next question. Earl will have the opportunity to answer first. He'll have 2 minutes. And the question is, what or who personally motivates you most when it comes to your approach to the climate crisis?
Thank you. Who or most? I guess not to just mention a person, but I like people that have science behind them and showing science. With regard to what Drew just said about, the reductions in CO, emissions during this COVID crisis and working at home. I want governments, I want the people to understand that each and every person makes a difference, and their actions personify, what will happen later on. It's like wearing a mask, self-distancing during the COVID crisis. That causes people not to get infected. Not doing those things causes people to get infected. By driving around and utilizing, I got to go to the store to pick up this can of something. And, I got to go to the store again to pick up this other can of something. Planning ahead, working from home has significant impacts. And it will help people, it will help the environment. And it's what we need to do collectively. There are accountability and there's consequences in our actions. And people need to be sharp and smart about it in order to make changes happen with regard to the pollution in our country. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Drew, you get a chance at this also. What or who personally motivates you most when it comes to your approach to the climate crisis? And you have 60 seconds.
Well, I think the same thing that motivates me with every decision that I'm faced in the legislature, and that is my grandchildren. I've got 2 beautiful granddaughters and a grandson that was just born during the middle of this COVID. And in everything that I do, I look at it from the viewpoint of what is the world that they're going to have 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And that is through the lens that I try to look at every issue that I face, and I'll continue to do that. We have a fiduciary responsibility to pass on to the future generations a better world than what we have, and that's true for every generation. That should be all of our mandates.
Thank you. And Darcy, the same question. What or who personally motivates you most when it comes to your approach to the climate crisis?
Well, I too am a grandma. I just had my granddaughter just graduated from high school this year, and I've got a son who is in college. And so I am also motivated by my kids and my grandkids. We do need to leave them a better world than what we came into. We do have that responsibility for them. And my son is extremely worried about the environment and having a world that he would be able to leave to his children as well. So you're absolutely right. They are the ones that motivate me to run for office and to do everything that I can to improve our environment, as well as many of the things that are important to us.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, and Drew will start this off. You have 2 minutes on this, Drew. Do you have plans to support acceleration of the adoption of solar and wind technologies in Washington State?
I think we need, when it comes to energy and more efficient energy, we got to look at everything, and we also have to make sure that we've got the technology to meet what we're trying to accomplish. You can't just mandate, everything must be wind and solar tomorrow, when that doesn't provide the grid what the grid needs. That creates dire economic consequences. So I believe that we incentivize, we move forward as we develop new technologies while we don't cripple our existing economy. And one of the things we could do today that would have an immediate impact is to convert our commercial fleet to natural gas. That would be an immediate 20% reduction in carbon emissions because it burns cleaner. Yes, it's still a fossil fuel, but it helps us bridge to newer technologies as we continue to develop those. And I served in the Navy in the nuclear field, which has given me a keen insight into a number of energy sources. But we've also got to come to an understanding that there is no perfect clean source of energy. There just isn't. When you produce a solar panel, there are 19 toxin chemicals that are byproducts that have no half-life. They're here forever, and they're toxic. That there is no one perfect pure source of energy. Energy is inherently powerful, and it's dangerous. So we've got to continue, though, to develop the technologies, allow for the energy field to do that as we increase our efficiencies with what we're using so that we don't cripple our existing economy.
Thank you, Drew. Next, Darcy, the same question. Do you have plans to support the acceleration of the adoption of solar and wind technologies in Washington State?
I would love nothing more than to have clean energy for Washington State and for the world. There isn't anything more important than that. But we do have to do it at a pace that we can keep up with. So technology is lagging a little behind on what we would like to be able to do, but with the proper incentives, I think that we can get to solar and wind sooner rather than later. I would wholly, however, disagree with using any more fossil fuel. I think that the sooner that we can get away from fossil fuel, the better off that we will be. And fossil fuels not only hurts our air, but it also hurts our land, and we just need to stop with the fossil fuels.
Earl, you're next up here. I'll ask the question again. Do you have plans to support the acceleration of the adoption of solar and wind technologies in Washington State?
Thank you. Yes, I do. One, there's new technology. It's called wafering, and it picks up all the different frequencies of sunlight coming into a solar cell. It's awesome, and it increases the efficiency of a solar cell from maybe 17 to 40%. And that technology is there. There's another thing that's used. It's called Redox Batteries, and it's a osmosis type of work. And the batteries are awesome. During the major fires in Southern California or Northern California, there was complete houses and neighborhoods wiped out. But some of the houses were fine, and they had their solar panels on the roof. And what happened was they couldn't run anything with those solar panels because they'd been in the grid. I propose to have solar panels and electricity wiring so that there'd be green outlets that hook up and you could run your blender or your microwave. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our final question for today, and we'll start with Darcy on this one. You'll have 2 minutes. How do you feel about term limits?
Oh, yeah.
Well, depends on what side of the aisle you're on. Sometimes I think term limits are a good thing, but I think that term limits are done by voters, and I think that the most important thing that we can do as a society is to vote. And so I believe a better thing than term limits would be to get out the vote, to encourage our citizens to vote as often as possible and to vote every single time. And I think we also need to make sure that voters understand just how important down ballot voting is. So on these off presidential years, we need to work doubly hard to get the voters at the ballot box. We make it so easy here in Washington State. And so if we just increased voter turnout, then we wouldn't need to have term limits.
Okay, thank you. Earl, you're next up on this question. And the question, of course, very simply is, how do you feel about term limits?
Thank you very much. I love this question. I started this whole political process about 3 months ago, and I told one of my neighbors that I'm running, and he goes, "What?" And he asked me, "What do you think of term limits?" And I said, "Well, I was born when Moby Dick was a minnow, and I said I got 1 foot in the grave and another foot on a banana peel, and term limits are looking pretty damn good to me right now. So term limits are fine. like Darcy said, it's up to the voters to get rid of somebody that they think they've been in there too long, like Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul and et cetera. You see by their behavior and their track record of what they've been doing. And if their track record has been damn good and working for the people, in their, for their constituents in their state, okay, leave them in there. But if they're dirt balls, you get rid of them. And you can have term limits, yes. Me, at my age, yeah, term limits are looking pretty good. So anyway, thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Earl. And Drew, you have the final shot at this question. How do you feel about term limits?
Yeah, I agree with Darcy. The voters we have it, and it's every election cycle. But let's look to where they have implemented it. In Oregon, in the 1990s, they instituted term limits. And what happened was they ended up repealing it, because what happened was that they had a 6-year cap on serving in the legislature. And what they were finding was that because there was a lack of continuum of knowledge, that the staff were, in fact, the ones that became the de facto decision makers, because they had that background. And when you look actually in the House of Representatives, the turnover is actually quite high from one election cycle to the other. People move on. We're a citizen legislature. And you have people that come in there, maybe they serve 4 years. You have others that have been there, in excess of 20 years. And you have others that are in the middle. And we have a pretty good turnover actually in the state of Washington on both sides of the aisle. And, it's certainly easy to pick, if you're Republican or Democrat, pick on who you don't like in the other party and say, yeah, we should have term limits because we don't like this person. But at the end of the day, again, when I'm talking about the state legislature, we've got that turnover that is happening, and the voters hold those cards every 2 years.
Great. Thank you all so much for your candor and your willingness to work through the questions that we've had so far. We're now to the point that you can make your closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute to make their closing statement. And in terms of using the rotation that we've been on, Earl, you have the first opportunity to make a 1 minute closing statement here.
All right, thanks. This is sweet. I've been politicking. I have one set of signs and I put them up in my truck. And I've seen many things happen. One is that I was up in northern Kitsap and I watched a truckload of kids driving up the road. And they were all in the back of the pickup. And they were high school graduates, I think, out of central Kitsap. And they turned on to El Dorado line. And they weren't wearing masks and they weren't wearing seatbelts. And accountability, right? And consequences. So one, safety for that, and the other thing. So I watched thousands of cars go by me, and I waved. And the thing that I've seen, everybody's wearing a seatbelt. But the thing that I've seen is a lot of people are using their cell phones. And on a few occasions, I can see them touching and not looking up. And I've had people drive right by me at 30, 40 miles an hour. That's a lot of yardage to cover. And I want you to quit texting. So thank you very much. This has been fun.
Thank you, Earl. Appreciate it. Next, Drew, you have 60 seconds to make your closing statement.
Well, thank you, Joel, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. I appreciate the opportunity. I also want to thank Earl and Darcy. I think, I believe in our republic that when we challenge a government and it makes our republic stronger, and to be able to debate those issues. And it helps us move our nation forward. So again, I just appreciate that opportunity to be here. Again, we're in a very challenging time right now, from a health standpoint and an economic standpoint. And I've got the background to be able to do that. And I believe our greatest days are yet to come. We've got challenges we got to work through, and we've got to tone down the rhetoric. We have to listen, and we got to stop labeling people. We're all Americans. We're all here. We all desire many of the same outcomes. We might see different paths in how we get there. But it has been one of my greatest honors to serve the people of the 35th District. I look forward to returning in January. And I ask for your support, and I look forward to earning that over the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. And to wrap things up here, Darcy, thank you so much for participating today. And you have 60 seconds to make your closing statement.
Thank you. I too would like to thank Earl and Drew and the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. I feel like I've really started running for office now, and so I very much have enjoyed this. I believe that right now, more than ever, we need leaders who aren't driven by party politics, but by the desire to help people. And I've been helping people my entire life, and I'm ready to work tirelessly on behalf of the people of the 35th to bring about real needed change. Our district was still recovering from the last recession when COVID-19 hit, and we can't afford to wait another 10 years to recover from this recession. We need leadership right now and a voice at the table where decisions are made. And today we have neither. But with your support and your vote, we can change that. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you to all three of you for taking time out on, at least for what's now, a nice looking day. And hopefully you'll all be successful as you work forwards with your campaigns. Drew MacEwen, Earl Burt, and Darcy Huffman, thank you so much. And thank you for participating in this forum. Thank you to Thurston County Media for coordinating the forum using Zoom. It will be available on the TCM channels, on the League website, and through a YouTube shortly after the forums are concluded. And we're glad you've taken the opportunity to view this forum. We remind you to vote in the primary election beginning July 17th and closing on August 4th, 2020.